Welcome to Keeping It Green. I'm Erin LaFave, and this is my co-host,
Nancy Skelly, and we're here to present gardening tips and ideas and environmentally friendly practices to keep your yard and garden growing.
I'm currently the horticulture educator for the University of Extension Eau Claire County office.
And I've been in the gardening industry for over 20 years. I formerly owned a garden center, and I have also worked for the Extension, and I just love to garden.
Today we're going to talk about soil testing. Soil testing involves going into the yard or garden and taking samples from the ground, and we'll show that today. And then we put it in the bag. We need 2 cups in the bag up to the line, and we can have, that can be given to the extension office, your local extension office, and they'll send it into the appropriate soil testing lab.
Do you have to dig from like one spot in the yard, or do you go, like, is it, if you have a problem area in your garden, would that be where you would take your soil sample from?
That's a good point. If you have a problem area in your garden, something's not growing properly, you can go in that specific area and take some samples in those areas and get a cumulative amount of 2 cups.
Okay.
And especially if you have a spot in your lawn that is a problem area that's not growing grass, that would be a good spot to do. And if you just want to do an overall assessment of where your soil levels are at for nutrients, then you just do an overall sampling of the yard or garden. And the soil sample will tell you potassium, phosphorus levels. If you need lime, it'll tell you what your pH is, and it'll also tell you your organic matter level.
Where does this go? Did you do that right at the extension office here in Altoona, or do you have to send it off somewhere?
No, we send it off to the appropriate lab. There's 2 of them. There's one in Marshfield and one in Verona, Wisconsin. And depending on if it's a crop field or lawn or garden or blueberry crop, we'll send it to the appropriate place. And our office in Eau Claire County charges $20 to send that out.
Okay. So when this soil test comes back, how do you make sense of it? How do you read it and understand it?
It will tell you, down here, it'll tell you your pH level, your phosphorus and potassium. And it actually has this nice scale. It tells you if you're low or too high on it. And then it will give you some appropriate recommendations in this area here. It will also tell you your organic matter. You want to have around 4% is good, and this particular test it says 5%, so that's good. And organic matter is essentially telling you what you have in your soil for like composted leaves and manure and anything that's not sand, silt, or clay.
Let's talk about the pH. So is pH a fertilizer? What does pH mean to you in the garden?
pH is telling you if you have acidic soil or if you have on the opposite end, basic soil. And that pH is good to know, especially if you want to grow acid-loving plants such as blueberries or azaleas.
Things grow best in a neutral pH, correct?
That's right.
All right.
Yes.
There
Neutral
we go.
pH, so that's about a 7.
Okay.
Neutral pH is on the scale, pH is on a scale of 1 to 14, and neutral is a 7, and that's about where you want most things to grow.
So if your pH is off, what would you use to correct that pH and make it neutral?
Well, we have some examples here today. So the lime helps to increase the number of the pH. So if you are too acidic, let's say you have a 4 on your pH and you need to go up to a 7 or a 6, then you would put lime on. If you want to go the other way and be more acidic, then you put sulfur on.
Fertilizer and plants grow best, work best in a neutral pH, but changing the pH itself is not fertilizing. pH is just what it is. It's not a fertilizer. So I know a lot of people seem to think that lime is a fertilizer, but it really isn't at all.
Right, and it's very difficult to change pH drastically. If you want to go from a 6 to a 5, you want to do that in about a year's time.
Right.
It's not as fast as you think it would be. Phosphorus in this area is usually off the charts. We usually have more phosphorus than we need.
Phosphorus on the lawn, especially if you're in a lake area where you have streams and rivers, which we have so many of around here, phosphorus is what causes the green algae and other problems in the lakes and rivers. So the state of Wisconsin and actually Minnesota as well have banned phosphorus in lawn fertilizer to help alleviate that problem. We've had so many years of it running into the streams that the green has gotten out of control, and we're hoping that by removing that from fertilizer, that will correct the problem. The one exception to that is I believe you are allowed to use a fertilizer with phosphorus if you're starting a new lawn, because that does help root development. And Milorganite, which is a product that comes out of Wisconsin, out of Milwaukee actually, is an organic fertilizer made from Milwaukee sewage, and it does have a 2 for the phosphorus number, but that is exempted from the ban because it's an organic, and the rate is so low it doesn't really affect anything. And that's fine for lawns or gardens.
And the sewage is actually heated to extremely high temperatures to remove any pathogen. You can also get lawn fertilizer with phosphorus in it if your soil test shows you're deficient in it for your lawn too. And most of those lawn fertilizers with phosphorus in them you have to ask the store owner for it.
Right. They're not allowed to put them out on the shelf because they don't want to just have people randomly coming in and buying them. But if you ask, usually they have them in their back room or something where they'll be able to get them for you and help you figure out which one's going to work the best for your situation. What does potassium do for your garden?
Potassium is good for root development and plants. And can you show us some examples of potassium?
To get potassium, the easiest way and the most available would be your muriate of potash, and that is available in most garden stores and hardware stores, and you're going to use that to get your potassium up to where it should be. It also helps with overall plant vigor and stem strength.
Now, nitrogen isn't on this soil sample because nitrogen leaches through the soil so fast. And leaching just means it flushes through the soil fast from rain and irrigation that you have. And they don't have a real good test to do nitrogen, but they do give some recommendations on the soil test based on what you may be growing, because you tell them what you're going to be growing, and then they can give you a recommendation for nitrogen. Nitrogen helps give that nice green, lush growth in plants, and too much nitrogen actually will inhibit flower development and fruit development. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're using it on flowers and vegetable gardens.
So for nitrogen, if you were growing a lawn, you'd want nitrogen because you want it to be nice and green and growing, where if you were trying to produce a tomato, you would probably want less nitrogen. You still want it to grow, but you're more interested in producing a fruit.
Right. You want the energy to go to the fruit, not all to the leaf.
I believe that that organic fertilizers tend to be carbon-based, and they do kind of bond with the soil molecules better. So even though the number may be lower on an organic fertilizer, it's going to remain available to the plant in the soil for a longer period of time than a chemical. Chemical fertilizers usually hang around for a couple weeks, and as it rains or you water it, they wash through, and if the plant doesn't use it while it's there, it's gone.
Do you want to show us what these numbers you speak of are and where they are on most of these fertilizers?
This lawn fertilizer, for example, is a 2603. So 26 would be your nitrogen number, and with a lawn fertilizer, you want that nitrogen to keep your lawn green and growing. The 0 is your phosphorus number, which we just talked about it being banned, and the 3 would be your potassium. So you want a strong hardy grass plant. The thing you're looking for most with a lawn fertilizer is green and growing. If you were growing, let's say, tomatoes or a blooming plant, the other fertilizers would have a larger middle number. The blooming and rooting, for example, has 58 for a middle number. So that would be something that would be excellent for a hanging basket because it's going to produce lots and lots of flowers, and that phosphorus is in a controlled situation where it's not going to leach onto anything else. The chemical fertilizer, the blooming and rooting, has large numbers, 9, 58, 8. And the organic fertilizer, the tomato, vegetable, and herb fertilizer, is only 462. And that relates to what I said before, where your organic elements, because they're carbon-based, remain available to the plant for longer than your chemical elements.
So we can still get phosphorus in things for our home gardens.
Correct. And it's great for containerized plants, especially if you're trying to grow like a containerized flower because you want that plant to bloom and bloom all season long. that you need to supply it with phosphorus to continue creating flower bloom.
Nancy, can you tell us about adding organic amendments and how that's different from chemical fertilizers?
People often ask, how much organic material should I add to my soil, or could I add to my soil? When adding things like worm castings, mushroom compost, or just cow manure, you can't really add too much of that. There are very few plants that like a nutrient deficient soil. There are a couple, but not very many. Usually by adding more organic material, it just makes the soil richer and more nutrient rich for your plants. So there's not a specific formula for that. You can just go ahead and work that in. Sometimes people like to work it in the spring if they're doing a garden plot. Otherwise, if you have flower plants that are already growing, you could top dress and just put it around the plant itself in the spring, and then maybe mid-season as well.
And you want the manure to be composted, have been set for 6 months or even more, because if it's very fresh from the animal, then you can burn the plants from the too much nitrogen.
I've also seen situations where because of what cows feed on, that it's full of weed seeds, and if you have unsterilized manure, that you'll wind up with a lot of weeds in your garden sometimes too.
Question of the week is at the Extension office is all about winter burn and winter kill and shrubs and plants or trees dying from this winter. Can you show us some of the damage that you've had in your yard and how to take care of it?
Sure. I've actually had a moderate amount of winter damage, and certain things seem to be more susceptible to problems. And it also has a lot to do with the direction a plant faces and where you throw your snow. These Weigela, this one here looks pretty darn good, but these, you can see there's a lot of dead. And basically how you're going to remedy that, wait a little bit first. People tend to get excited early in the season and want to cut everything up. Wait until it starts to leaf out so you can see what you have to remove, and then you can just reach in there and take out the dead wood as far down into the plant as you can. And then you're going to probably want to shape the plant a little bit too, so it still has a pleasing shape. Then the two things that are important are watering, because a plant is not going to regenerate itself without adequate water, and fertilizing with a kind of a lower grade fertilizer to help the plant have some food to build new leaves and stems.
I see a shrub over here that looks pretty sad. So what would you do with a plant like this that has lots of dieback?
This one, because it's a spirea, I could actually cut this almost to the ground. Spireas are a pretty tough plant and they tend to regenerate. And I'm basically on this guy probably going to cut out about half the plant, and again keep it well watered and see what happens. And occasionally a plant, it's just never going to be pretty again. And no matter what you do to it, if it's really ugly, get rid of it and try something new in that spot.
What are some of the things that we can do in the growing season to help our plants get through the winter?
Possibly the most important thing to make a plant ready for winter is stop fertilizing as of August, because you don't want that plant to be generating new green growth, and keep it watered until the ground freezes, which is usually closer to Thanksgiving. In September, things tend to look green and wonderful, and people think, oh, well, it's got plenty of water. You need to water weekly until about Thanksgiving time, and then your plant should have adequate water in its tissues to make it through even a hard winter.
And maybe in some of those areas where the shrub gets a lot of sun during the winter and maybe some wind, maybe there's a barrier we can put up?
You can use burlap. Some people will just create a screen with burlap and cover it up, or throw a bag over the top of it. There's also a couple products out on the market, Wilt Proof, and I think there's another one called Wilt Stop, that you can spray. It's an anti-desiccant, so it helps the plant retain water in the tissues. And you just spray it onto the plant itself once the weather is cool, and it helps that water not dry out so fast in the winter.
So now we're going to look at this tree that we kind of call contorted because it's having a lot of issues. Can you tell us what's happening with this?
This is a Norway maple, and again, this plant faces directly west. It's in an exposed area, and over the years as it's grown, it has frost cracked. Sometimes it can be a very serious issue, but as you can see, the plant is trying to heal itself. It's growing a curved tissue around here to cover up the part that's bad. To help it along, you can get in there and scrape out little pieces of the dead stuff and the nasty stuff. And this plant is going to continue to work on healing itself. You don't have to spray paint it or do anything else. Again, water is an important issue. And Norway maple is a species of maple that tends to be more susceptible to frost cracking than other maples like red maple or sugar maple, for instance. So if you have a really exposed area, the Norway maple, which would include your variegated maple, your royal red maple with the dark red leaves, and just this simple Norway, might be a plant that you wouldn't want to choose for that spot where it's open and facing south or west where it gets a lot of sun in the winter.
For those people who may not have lots of yard space or don't want to put in a great big garden, especially for vegetable gardens, what are some of the options they can use? I see this nice big structure you have here. Can you tell us how you're using this to grow these tomatoes?
Sure. This is an earth box, and it's one of the, you could make your own, but this one you can buy a kit for it at a lot of different stores. You can buy it online. There are 2 tomato plants in here, and it's a very controlled environment. It has a nice sterile potting mix used as the soil, and then the earth box kit will come with fertilizer, and if you're going to grow tomatoes, they have a little package of dolomitic lime. And the reason you'd add that with the tomatoes is because it prevents blossom end rot, where your tomato gets rotten on the bottom in the middle of the summer and then they're all nasty and you can't eat them. And then you plant your plants, and there's this little cover that covers the soil so it keeps weeds out, so you never have to weed. It has a water well that will, it's good for a weekend of watering. Basically, if you're going to go away for the weekend, it would be fine. If you're going to be gone longer than 2 or 3 days, you're going to want to have somebody come and fill it up. And so it's all watering from the bottom. You never have to water the tomatoes on the top. So that would also prevent any spread of blight or disease that would run down the plant as you water it. And I have the trellis on mine. You can go with or without, it's up to you. But I have had tomatoes that got over 6 feet tall in this box. One particularly nice summer, the 2 tomatoes I had in my earth box produced over 200 tomatoes on 2 plants. It was amazing. So it's a really easy way to grow. You could have it right by your back door and just pick tomatoes right off your plant, and it would be super simple.
So the water reservoir at the bottom is essentially letting the plant get as much water as it needs whenever it starts to dry out.
Right.
That is a great solution to watering.
Yeah, it makes it's almost foolproof, and all the problems that a person might encounter with trying to grow tomatoes, I mean, you've seen them in a hay bale or in a bucket or anything, and those are all fine too, but this is kind of the Tomatoes for Dummies box, because you can't mess it up. If you follow the directions that come with it and water it and use the fertilizers that are provided, you're going to have a beautiful plant with a great crop.
Can you grow other kinds of vegetables in these?
It has a neat little map with it. I think you can grow like 4 peppers. It says you can grow 16 corn plants, which I would like to see. I think that's a little crazy. But yeah, you could grow herbs in here if you wanted to. This just, for me, has been particularly well suited to my tomato growing needs.
And we have some of these at the youth gardens, and we've grown peas in them, and the peas love it because they can keep their roots cool and moist all season long.
Yeah. And it's a one-time investment. I've had mine for over 10 years, and it's still in great shape. And it's growing beautiful plants. I'm starting to get lots of flowers, so I can't wait for July when my tomatoes start to come.
And you mentioned that these can actually be made. I think if people are looking to make their own, you can search the word sub-irrigated planters, because then you'll get these nice designs of how to make your own with buckets and with even box structures and lots of things out there.
And even if you could probably just get a regular container and grow them too, but you want to keep your soil covered so it keeps the weeds out, and just make sure you have an even water source, which could be accomplished even by putting a saucer of water under your planter if necessary.
Do you have any other examples of planters to show?
I do. I don't have much garden space for vegetables, so I grow my herbs outside my back door as well. This particular planter has 2 different kinds of basil. It has lemon thyme and rosemary. I've also grown sage and oregano in a planter like this. My secret for this is I use, there's a product called Magnamoist, and it comes either in a roll or as a liner for the bottom of your pot. And it actually, especially with a porous terracotta pot like this, helps the soil retain moisture for much longer than it normally would, because on a hot day in the summer sometimes a pot like this would dry out in one day, but with the Magna Moist product on the bottom of it, it actually keeps the soil from drying out, and I don't lose plants because they just cook.
How much do you water? How often? What are some tips for containers?
Containers, especially like a hanging basket type container, it depends on how hot it is, how windy it is, and where you have it located in your yard. Some containers require a lot more water than others, but generally, especially in the heat of the summer, every day. Obviously, if it's a cool rainy day, you can go a little bit longer between waterings. And some container plants need to be watered twice a day, sometimes in the morning and in the evening, especially if it's been very hot and dry.
Usually how I test it is I put my finger in there and just put it about an inch down, and if it's still moist in there, then I leave it alone. But if it's dry, then I water it, and I water it until it runs out the bottom.
Right. And if, like you're saying, if dirt comes off on your finger, then there's still some moisture there, but if it's real dusty. The other thing you can do, and it's harder with a container like this, but when your plant is well watered, judge the weight of the container, and if you're not really sure, if it's really light, it probably needs water, and if it's really heavy, it probably is well watered or possibly even overwatered, because we both know that sometimes the symptoms of underwatering are very similar to the symptoms of overwatering. Yellowing leaves could mean either one, and you're just going to have to judge by your soil and the weight of your planter to see which one it is.
Do you have I see you have some flowering containers here. Do you have tips for shade versus sun flowers in the containers?
Sure, and one of the best ways to figure out what a plant needs is to look at the little tag. This one has a little full sunshine on it there, so these plants need full sun, and this is facing south and west on my deck, so it gets lots and lots of sun. The plants I've chosen in here, this is guara, which will bloom pink a little bit later in the season, and it's very attractive to butterflies. This is a new petunia called Cha-Ching Cherry, and petunias are extremely tolerant of a lot of different things. They tolerate dry, they tolerate heat, and they do really well if you forget to water them for one day. And then for the bright color, this is a lantana. I believe this is Bandana Cherry Sunrise, and a vining geranium that will hopefully vine down the side of that container.
You said full sun. What does that mean? Is it just any time of day it gets a certain amount of sun?
Full sun plants need more than 6 hours of sun during the day. Sometimes if you have a spot that gets sun in the morning and then again late in the afternoon, if it equals 6 hours, that's fine. And remember, a lot of times if it got 4 or 5 hours of very hot afternoon sun, a full sun plant will grow in that exposure too, even though it's not really technically the time frame, because hot afternoon sun is much stronger in the summer than morning sun. This container sits on the north side of my house, and it has lobelia, which does very well in a shadier spot. It likes morning sun. It can take about 4 hours. It has a bright lime green coleus and a beautiful tuberous begonia. And tuberous begonias are kind of neat because they're one of the only plants that have both male and female flowers on the same plant. So you have the flower that has many, many petals, and then a flower that just has a few petals. One is the male and one is the female.
Now, coleus is usually a sun-loving plant, but if we put it in a shade container, it'll just stay smaller, is that right?
Sometimes I've had them get huge in shade containers too. Many coleus will tolerate a great deal of shade, and again, it's just a matter of reading your plant tags. Some do better than others. Some really need that full sun, and like the Kong coleus in particular that get really large, those won't take hardly any sun at all. They need to be in the shade. So that's why those growers put the plant tags in there for you, to give you a little bit more information to make your choices. And if you're shopping in a garden center store rather than a box store, generally you're going to have staff there that can help you with things that you might have better success with as well. Sometimes the box stores, they just get their stuff in and they don't know which plants are going to be the best or not, and the garden centers have employees that they train to help you pick plants for good situations.
No, the container, you can use any container, but it also always has to have good drainage.
Right.
And we've been talking about having the water run out the bottom and having good drainage that way. So that's probably just the only requirement for a container.
Right. If you grew something in a container with no hole in the bottom that had no drainage, I know people say, oh, you could put rocks in the bottom and stuff, but it's still pretty easy to overwater that particular plant and wind up with, you know, sloppy. And once they're wet and rotten, they're not coming back. Plants will tend to recover from being dry much better than they recover from being too wet.
And even this sub-irrigated planter, this earth box, has a...
It has a drain hole so you can't fill it too full.
Right. It's really foolproof.
Yep, it is.
So one of the questions I get often, and you've probably had this question too, is what is going on with this leaf here?
You know, it's almost kind of pretty, but it's actually insect damage.
Wow, do you know what it's called?
That is a leaf miner, and what a leaf miner does is it eats the green tissue in your leaf, and it can eventually, I'm not going to say it's going to kill your plant, but it could badly damage a plant and prevent it from blooming well because it's taking all the nutrients from the green material out of the leaf.
But if you just have a few leaves, I consider that just a cosmetic problem. If the whole plant were infected, maybe we want to treat it. This one we see very much on what kind of plants?
This is a columbine, and they are particularly prone to leaf miner, and usually it's once the plant starts to, you know, get bigger and into flower, you're going to see something present like this. And if there's just a couple leaves like that, probably the easiest way to get the bug off the plant is just to pick those couple leaves off. Right. If you had a more serious problem where you saw it on many of the leaves, then you might want to use, you could use an organic insecticide like neem, which would take care of that problem quite easily.
But as you can see, this plant is not really affected by the problem.
Nope, it's pretty happy. So we just took that leaf off and we'll just get rid of it. Never throw a leaf that is infected by an insect or a disease into your compost, because then you're infecting your whole compost bin. You want to make sure that you just throw those in the garbage. Wow, there's a lot of weeds in this area of my garden. Erin, do you know what might be causing the abundance of weeds in this particular spot?
Well, it looks like you're trying to do the right thing. You're using some bark mulch to keep them smothered out, but I can see here that you have a bird feeder. And when the birds are in there knocking things around, they're probably knocking some seed down, and they're then sprouting in this nice mulch mixture. So you can either just remove this bird feeder, or you'll just have to come in and pull them out, maybe even add some more bark mulch.
Well, that's the nice thing about using bark mulch as a weed preventer, because it is really easy to get them out of here. They come out pretty simple as long as you don't let them get too out of control.
And it looks like there must be some sort of elm tree nearby, because you have these seeds, and then they're sprouting here. So there's not much you can do about that in short of cutting down the tree, but I'm sure somebody doesn't want you coming to cut down their tree. But if you get them early enough, as you can see, they're really easy to pull out by the root. Thank you for joining Keeping It Green. On future episodes, we'll have guests on from around the Chippewa Valley talking about other lawn care and garden tips to keep your best lawn and garden. Thank you for joining us.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.